Greetings. Thanks to all of you who have subscribed. It's not easy building an audience on YouTube, so I really appreciate you making it that little bit easier for me to find you with these videos. If you haven't yet, please do click the button. I promise there'll be plenty more of these to come. I really do appreciate it. Anyway, on to our video. This is not going to be easy. After my last 3 videos about the Master System, it seemed to make sense to move on to its successor, the Mega Drive. I got a grey import Japanese model for Christmas 1989, a good 9 months before it was officially released in the UK, and I was absolutely delighted. Yu Suzuki said the Outrun arcade should make people feel superior, but that was nothing compared to owning this machine 9 months before anyone else I knew. The grey import market in the UK was the result of the European launch being many months after the Japanese and North American launches, and the mystique of the games was massively increased by the Japanese packaging and full colour manuals all in Japanese. I remember smuggling the Ghouls and Ghosts manual into school when it had arrived in the Morning Post and basically just staring at it in my school books all day long. And I was a straight A student. So what's the difficulty? Well, this was a machine I absolutely fell in love with. But also, it's the only games console I actually sort of split up with. I didn't sell it or anything, but I was 12 when I got it. By the time I was 16, I actually felt I'd grown out of it. It was slightly embarrassing that I still played it from time to time. Also, in my mind, the Mega Drive is a complicated machine to consider. I'm only really qualified to discuss it from 1989 to about 1993. And even then, for me, that encompasses 2 totally distinct periods. The Japanese grey import period and the later Western period. And the Mega Drive desperately wanted to be cool. And I very much thought it was, in the first period. But it still wanted to be cool in the second period in a totally different way. And then I really wasn't sure it was cool. I was growing up, and it was seemingly aiming at a younger audience. So can I really deal with all this in one video? Not a chance. I think the sensible thing to do is to first take a look at why I loved the machine at the start, what it was aiming for and whether it achieved it. The weird thing is that when I consider my Mega Drive, the machine I fell in love with and really appreciated, suddenly I realised that this initial experience was a lot like owning a Saturn or even a Dreamcast, a somewhat obscure machine with impeccable arcade conversions. The Mega Drive was designed to be cool, and it did that by aping the look of a hi-fi component, basically a CD player. It came complete with volume slider and random words about being an AV intelligent terminal for high-grade multi-purpose use, which, let's face it, was totally untrue. The idea was clearly to aim it at teenagers. This theme was maintained when the actual Mega CD was released, and it was added underneath like a hi-fi separate system. Interestingly, JVC made a version where the cartridge slot was shifted to the left and the curved part became the CD player. This makes perfect sense, but ironically it just ends up looking like a normal DVD player with a hole in it. The black curved design was copied over into the controllers, which both felt snug in the hand and looked like a Batman weapon on the floor. You could say the design was a cynical attempt to tick young teenagers' boxes, but if so, it worked for me. The first games I received that Christmas were Super Thunderblade, Altered Beast, Super Hang-On and Thunder Force 2. They showed off the machine's increased power over the Master System, but none of these are games I really want to relive. Thunderblade was frustrating and didn't carry the name recognition of Sega's other superscalar arcade machines. Altered Beast's large sprites looked amazing in screenshots in magazines, but it was only really fun with a second player. My brother and I used to think of it as a sort of Manimal in ancient Greece. Thunder Force 2 was decent, but not revelatory, and Super Hang-On was a lot of fun, but tainted by a feeling of it having been there before in a game that had even been given away with the Master System. The boost made it a lot of fun though. No, it was the games I bought during its first year that really delivered on the machine's promise. As I set out in my previous video, when I think of Master System games, I think of blue skies and bright colours. Sega's arcades were and still are famous for these. But the Mega Drive was never aiming to cheer anyone up. It was never going to sing like Daytona. The colour that it claimed for itself was black. For me, this was the first console that was able to really use black. Not as a default power-saving backdrop like the early arcades and early Famicom games, but in the way that cinema had taught us to view it. Dangerous, deadly, sinister, sexy, but cool, cool, cool. The game that demonstrates this to perfection is the Super Shinobi, later renamed Revenge of Shinobi for its world release. You only have to watch the attract screen with its initial James Bond riff and its amazing use of black space to understand that this game is claiming to be the real deal. Not a depowered spin-off of the arcade game, but a home console sequel that will actually improve on the arcade original. It's worth taking a look back at the arcade game to see how they decided to make the follow-up not just cooler, but more authentic. The original is clearly based on films like American Ninja and other martial arts products designed to appeal to Western audiences. The main character is called Joe. It's set in America. Andy Warhol's Marilyn Monroe pictures adorn the walls, presumably as a shorthand way of showing this. Our main character looks pretty pale-skinned, and he wears the sort of bright costume that one of the X-Men might consider. In the Master System version, they even give the ninja on the attract screen, who presumably they're here taking to be Joe, blue eyes to encourage the feeling that he may be an American. It's actually quite hard to pin down whether Joe is supposed to be half American or entirely Japanese. His surname is Musashi, so presumably he's one or the other. Of course, it doesn't matter in itself, but it tells us what the designers were aiming for. In the original, they were keen to render the Japanese ninja concept in a way they regarded as friendly to Western audiences. Shinobi was one of the Master System's coolest games, albeit there were obvious limitations. The moody sunset backdrop comes over as an almost alien purple, and a cruel person might point out that his main real ninja skill is being able to duck, whereas his enemies can only hold one pose. It's still a quality game though. On the Mega Drive, there's a real feeling that they were tired of making concessions to Western tastes and felt they no longer had to. The character on the title screen clearly is Joe as he's defending rather than attacking, but his face is clearly Asian. When the game starts, he is dressed in a way that makes no concessions to Western tastes. He looks like an assassin. In cinematic terms, this feels more like a film which might have subtitles than one with bad dubbing. For the first time that I can remember in any video game, this time you actually, rather than implying a sunset, actually get to see the effect on the sky of the sun setting. By the second level, it's nighttime. Notice how they keep the nighttime backdrop interesting, by that moon which follows you across the level as you go past. Not just appearing when you're outside the building, but also appearing perfectly through each of the windows in the building. You can tell they were damn proud of this technique, because they've actually decorated the building not only with a cherry tree, but also with the crescent moon itself. I'm not qualified to say how authentic it actually is, but it certainly feels intriguingly alien. The programmers thought of this as being an athletic action game. That is to say, Joe actually does have some special ninja moves now. A correctly timed second jump turns it into a roll, which becomes crucial to progression. One of the strange quirks of this game is that it was released containing enemy versions of Rambo, Spider-Man and Batman. Spider-Man was then officially licensed and the other two altered, but 4 separate versions were made necessary as a result. Forgive, by the way, my blatant use of an invincibility cheat here, but I wanted to get them all together in a short clip. The game's designer claims he expected the final product to contain bosses loosely based on those superheroes, that just move like the characters, not literal reproductions. I'm not sure I fully buy that, not least because Batman never could have moved like the actual Batman, because in this game he can fly. What no one ever comments on though, and what actually struck me as a kid playing it, was that these American icons were all baddies. My reading is that this was another sign of the cultural confidence of the programmers. The Japanese ninja is clearly depicted as being superior one by one to America's national heroes. For me, this reflects the Japanese gaming industry shrugging off its deference to American culture and revelling in a culturally authentic product, What could make it clearer that our ninja is the master of athletic action than that he is able to kill Spider-Man? All combined, by 80s standards, this more than sold the Mega Drive as a genuinely cool product. Now, as a treat, because you got this far, I'm going to play another of my favourite early releases. I could easily have gone with Ghouls and Ghosts or Strider, both of which support my case about the Mega Drive's use of black. But frankly, I'd rather totally undermine my case by showing a bit of a game which deserves to be ranked alongside all of those. The game that no doubt inspired Grand Theft Auto, the original vehicle stealing simulator itself. The New Zealand Story! A game I can't recommend highly enough, which I've only just found out was exclusive to my Japanese Mega Drive. That feeling of superiority comes flooding back.